The legend of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas is well known and often argued about. Given that people were already residing there, can it genuinely be regarded as a discovery? Also, he didn't find the North America that most people expect. He ended up in South and Central America. These are all good points, but they take the spotlight off of a more fundamental mystery. Why did Europeans believe Christopher Columbus and not the Vikings to have discovered the Americas? The Scandinavian Viking. Leif Erikson landed in North America some 500 years before Christopher Columbus actually set foot on American soil. It is now widely accepted that he was the very first European to accomplish this. Eric the Red, a famous Viking explorer, was born Leif Erikson in Iceland about 970 AD. Following his father's exile from his native homeland of Norway due to manslaughter, Eric initially resided in Iceland. However, Eric's banishment from Iceland occurred when Leif was a young child, as a result of his father's murderous ways and the death of a neighbor. Leif thus spent some of his formative years in Greenland, the site of Eric's new town. When Erikson was an adult, he decided to travel to Norway, where King Olaf I Tryggvason persuaded the young explorer to become a Christian. To convert his fellow pagan immigrants, the monarch then assigned Leif the mission of returning to Greenland. However, the exact sequence of events remains uncertain. The reason behind this is that two sagas provide conflicting accounts of Leif Erikson's subsequent years. The sagas are legendary tales from Iceland, originally transmitted orally and later recorded in writing in subsequent centuries. Regarding Erikson, his voyage to the New World is depicted in two epic tales. While both provide a chronology that starts at about 1000 AD, they diverge on the specifics. According to one chronicle, the Chronicle of the Greenlanders, a man named Bjarni Herjolfsson had told Leif incredible tales about a strange realm over the sea. It was around 10 years ago when the Icelandic trader Bjarni set sail for what was intended to be Greenland, but instead went closer to North America. Even though he never set foot in the distant region, he was certain that it existed and that he had definitely missed Greenland. This concept of a previously uncharted place captivated Leif Erikson to the point that he mustered a crew to set sail for it. With a crew of 35 and a ship in readiness, Leif set off to reenact Bjarni's voyage. Sailing safely across the enormous Atlantic, the explorer and his crew eventually arrived on North American beaches, maybe in what is now Canada. The Vikings' landing ground, which Erikson dubbed Helluland, meaning stone slab land in Old Norse, was an apt description of their newfound territory. Historical research has recently focused on the region around what is now believed to be Baffin Island. However, the saga itself was unable to provide any specifics. Leif named the area Markland, meaning forest land, because of the abundance of trees and lumber resources there. The following section did indicate that the Scandinavians continued southward, probably to what is now Labrador. So far, this new planet had been nothing but good news. As the Vikings approached what is now thought to be the tip of Newfoundland, their fascination with the country grew. For the upcoming winter, Erikson and his troops likely established camp here, taking advantage of the milder climate than what they were used to back home. As the Vikings continued their excursions, they found verdant scenery, abundant wild grapes, and rivers teeming with tasty fish. Leif gave the area the name Vinland, meaning wine land. This is the stuff of adventurers' dreams, and it all sounds fantastic. However, the fundamental premise of the two tales diverges at that point. The second, Eric the Red's saga, claims that finding the New World wasn't an exciting triumph, but rather a catastrophic error. According to this alternate narrative, Leif was actually returning to Greenland from Norway when he accidentally ran over the United States. No matter the motivation behind the journey, Erikson and his men returned to Greenland. Around this time, Eric the Red's death led to the appointment of Leif as the chief of the Greenland settlement. When Erikson departed from North America after his adventure in Canada, he did not establish any kind of permanent settlement or colony in the area. Nonetheless, more Vikings would keep venturing out into the New World in the years that followed, leading to the founding of a number of makeshift communities. Many people think that Thorvald, Leif's brother, was the first European ever laid to rest in American soil because he was killed while on an expedition in North America just 3 years after Leif's journey. This was due to persistent conflict with the native communities. But that's all conjecture at this point, and many people still claim the story hasn't been confirmed. To be more precise, how reliable are these tales? Have they actually happened? Yes, We can believe the Icelandic tales if you ask a large number of historians, archaeologists, and such professionals. We include true historical events, even though certain aspects may have changed over time. There is evidence that backs up the accounts of Leif's journey to North America, and it fits in perfectly with the sagas. A Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad discovered exactly what he had been seeking in 1960 while exploring what is now Canada for Viking artifacts. Helge, after a long and fruitless search of the Labrador and Newfoundland coastlines, finally located evidence of a long-vanished community in Newfoundland's northernmost point, notably in L'Anse aux Meadows. Excavation that followed the appointment of a global archaeology team to investigate Ingstad's claims verified that the artifacts in question really belonged to the Vikings and could be linked to the same century in which Ericsson was said to have lived in the region. In addition, researchers have gone to the next level and tested 3 pieces of wood from the Viking remains to determine their specific year of usage, according to an article in the Nature Journal. The project was a success, and the scientists were able to date the lumber's cutting to 1021 AD, according to the journal. At first glance, this seems to go against the grain of the sagas, which put Leif's journey around 1000 AD. But according to many experts, that's not the case. According to Dr. Colleen Beatty, a Viking expert at Scotland's Institute for Northern Studies, the fact that Vikings were in North America in the 1020s doesn't rule out the possibility that they were there around the turn of the century as well. Whatever it was that caused the Vikings to fell those trees in 1021 might have been just one phase of their occupation, says Dr. Beatty. Keep in mind that theorizing a series of follow-up trips that pursued Ericsson's has already been done is vital. Without examining the entire thing, we can't tell if the ruins were erected in 1021 AD or if the lumber examined was part of later repairs of an older structure. While the date may be somewhat incorrect, this in no way disproves the sagas. To the contrary, this evidence lends credence to the whole story. Consequently, did Christopher Columbus make landfall in the Americas before any other European? Or perhaps it was the Viking band led by Leif Erikson. Were the northern parts found 500 years ago by the Vikings and the southern and central parts by Columbus? Given the abundance of indigenous peoples already living on these continents, can any of it really be considered a discovery? We can argue about all of that. The tales related in Icelandic mythology regarding a Viking saga who discovered the Americas, however, appear to have passed the point of no return. A UNESCO heritage site now includes the remnants of Ericsson's Newfoundland encampment. Additionally, on October 9, 1964, American President Lyndon B. Johnson proclaimed Leif Erikson Day to commemorate the arrival of the first organized group of Norwegian immigrants to the United States, which occurred in 1825 with the landing of the Restoration. Auth explorers were honored on the same day in 2023, which happened to be early October, coinciding with Christopher Columbus Day. Death and life from Europe arrived in the Americas via both Ericsson and Columbus. In their pursuit of discovery and colonization, both of these entities invaded the homelands of indigenous Native American communities. In reality, though, the Vikings were the ones who first laid eyes on the Americas.